for taking down the Christmas decorations. It's not near as fun as putting it up, I find. It's almost like a chore. As much as I've enjoyed having a lit Christmas tree and breaking my dietary rules, it's good to start getting back to normal. But we mustn't be in a liturgical rush, because it's still Christmas. In fact, today is the last and 12th day of Christmas, which might explain why my true love gave to me 12 leaping lords. It might not. Oh, come on, I thought that was hilarious. I had to look up what was on the 12th day, because I never get that far in the song. But more truly, because we're coming towards the end of our Christmas celebrations, we get the more obscure texts, the ones we don't always associate with Christmas. Now, our wise men are still wandering around somewhere out there, so that's not the text we get to listen to. Instead, we get to hear from John. And John is the other guy. So we've got Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they all kind of follow the same trajectory. And that's why they're called the Synoptic Gospels. And then there's John. Kind of like the crazy uncle that everybody has, that you appreciate and like to see, but still a little confusing in its excitement. So, John doesn't start out like the other Gospels do. The other Gospels start with John the Baptist, or a prophecy involving John the Baptist, or chronology, or, stuff that's fairly contemporary, but leave it to John to go big. He goes right back to the beginning. So how did you know God was a baseball fan? Because it all started in the big inning. Yeah, that one came from a book. So John must have also been a baseball fan, or at least a fan of trueness to Scripture, because he says, in the beginning, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Save that one for later. We're still in the beginning, but this is how the Genesis one goes. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. No introduction in the world compares to that in my books. Like that, you can't beat that. I don't even think you can add to that, but somehow John manages. And he talks about the Word. And it is the Word that does the creating. Because God spoke and said, "Let there be light." Then the very next thing it says is, "And then there was light." God spoke a word, and what was spoken then became true. So John adds to this epic creation story, and he says, "In the beginning was the Word," capital W. "And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him. And without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it." Did your mind just explode there? Because it should have. This is pretty amazing stuff. Because I never really thought, until I read this, that you could possibly add on to the first words in Genesis, the first words of our Scripture, but somehow John does, in a way that is authentic, in a way that is true. It's awesome. by every definition of the word, awe-inspiring, source of awe, amazing. It's a whole new ballgame to tie Jesus in with creation itself. It's going to a place, a perspective that Matthew, Mark, and Luke did not go. And that's amazing. If you have a chance this week or in the weeks to come to take those two pieces, the first 4 verses of Genesis and the first 4 verses of John, and to sit with them side by side, please do. Because it is truly genius and truly inspired. Flesh is what it's all about. And could be that we have a lot of British ancestry, whether it's cultural or biological, but we don't like talking about body stuff. We're terrible about it. We get squeamish. We don't like to talk about going to the doctor or what's going on with our own being. But then we have Jesus, who came to walk among us and began on earth as a crying, pooping baby, just like the rest of us. Jesus didn't get any free passes just because he was God. He didn't get to pass on being itchy or sweaty or cold or uncomfortable. He didn't get to have a pass on puberty. He didn't get a pass on any of the parts of humanity because he spent an entire life, from birth to death and after, as a human. All so that grace and truth could be ours and could be shared the right way. And this is the phrase, the grace and truth part. That's what we're all about. If we skip that, we aren't Christians. That's kind of the whole point. Grace and truth. And the phrase in our text today, verse 17, which is the first spot we actually hear the name Jesus. It takes that long for the Word, the light, the creation, the Creator to be called Jesus. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So as much as Christmas is a celebration of God incarnate, like that's a phrase that's kind of off in the ether. That's a phrase that isn't quite so tangible. But flesh, you can touch flesh, you can pinch it, you can wash your hands and feel it. The Word made flesh in the beginning, as part of creation, not as a piece of creation, but as part of the Creator. That's no small thing. Jesus put up with itchiness and coldness and discomfort and joy and the whole bit so that we could receive truth and grace. God intentionally took human form in all of its limitations, in all of its grandeur, so that God may connect with us more deeply and show us that truth and grace in a way that would reside within us as people with a body who walk within creation. So the story that Paige read for us, that one talks a lot about how everybody is a little bit different, but a little bit the same. And the part it didn't quite get to, because it's not an official church scriptural-based children's story, was that everyone was made in the image of God. Everyone. Whether you can dance or have glasses or tell funny jokes, you are made in the image of God. So when God creates humanity in Genesis 1, so that's just a little later on from in the beginning the earth was a formless void. A little later on, it said, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness. Again, if your mind's not blown, it should be, because that's amazing. The word they use for God here is Adonai, and that's plural. So this is one of those little pieces that scholars have been arguing about for a long time. It could mean that it's God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. It could mean that God had more than one image of God's self. But whatever it means, it is one more piece of information that I put under my theory that supports. I've only had one cup of coffee today, guys. I'm so sorry. One more piece of information to support my theory that the human body is sacred. Every human body. The human body God took when the Word was made flesh. Your human body, my human body, all human bodies. And if this were not so, I'm not sure Jesus would have wandered around wearing one for 30 or so years. Holy. That's what this is. That's what you have. Always. No matter what is taken away from you, no matter what is gained, you will always have that. So as much as we are celebrating the delivery of grace and truth through Jesus during Christmas, we are celebrating our own humanity and the sacredness of life that it brings. So in my little bit odd sense of humor, a little bit of a Finnish sense of humor, because I have that in my background, I think this is kind of funny, that we talk about grace and humanity in one go, because for the most part, being human is not graceful at all. All you have to do is look at somebody eat, and you think, really? God, what were you thinking? This is not graceful. But I can't help but wonder, maybe it is through this limitedness that we can truly understand grace. Because grace is bigger than us. Grace is more than any of our shortcomings, any of our successes. It makes sense to talk about grace and the human body at once. See, grace is mercy and love and understanding and forgiveness and accompaniment and so much more. Grace is it, like the big it, capital I. Grace is only grace because of who we are as humans and because of who God is as our Creator. See, grace was always the plan from the very beginning. And grace is the Word, capital W. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through Him. And without Him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in Him was life. And the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. So next time You go out for dinner and you're frustrated with the person across from you who is eating messily. Or you have pain in your joints and they don't move quite like they used to. Or you experience human frailty at its core and it just hurts. Remember that God's grace shown to us through that very same human body is so much more. And it is yours. Because that's Jesus' Christmas and Easter gift to us. Remember your grace and take care of your body.